Minister, the reason I put down this question for topical issue was last week on the retirement of the CMO. I noted that in his list of accomplishments, the publication of the previous National Rare Disease Plan was listed. And funnily enough, that was published in 2014 and I suppose extended until 2018. So since then, since 2018, we have had no replacement to the old National Rare Disease Plan. So it got me thinking, just what have we done in the intervening 4 years in relation to the publication of the new plan? And the new plan is important because there are approximately 300,000 people in Ireland that suffer from a rare disease. And to be fair to the current Minister for Health, he's actually allocated last year the largest budget in the history of the state towards rare diseases, a budget of 50 million, which was very welcome. But the difficulty we have is not just that there are 300,000 patients who need to see the action and the publication of this plan, but there's a startling statistic there that globally 30% of all children under the age of 5 that are unfortunate enough to contract or to genetically get a rare disease will die by the age of 5, 30% of all children. And it's a scary statistic and it's a scary, unfortunate truth. But in this country, we are laggards in terms of our provision for rare diseases. And I say that because, not just because the National Rare Disease Plan is yet to be published, the current one, it's in the programme for government. It's down as one of the priorities, publish an updated National Rare Disease Plan. Now we're 2 years into the lifetime of this government, and I'd love if you could give us an update in relation to the publication of that plan. And secondly, and linked to this, is also a report called the Mazars report, which was meant to look into the higher technical assessment, the HTA process, for the reimbursement of orphan drugs in relation to rare diseases. And that report, again, was commissioned, I think, in 2017. It was submitted to the Department of Health in 2020, and it's essentially sat on somebody's desk for the last 2 years, unpublished, at a cost of €86,000 to the state. And I'd love as well, maybe you don't have the detail this evening, but I would love to see where that Mazars report is. It's incomprehensible as to why we spend so much money on a report to leave it sitting gathering dust. And that report will contain valuable insights into how we plan in the future for rare diseases. And I'd love to know not just what's in the plan, but it's obviously what's in the plan. It must be damning, or there must be, something coming that's going to require dramatic change, because we seem afraid to publish it. So I really, really want to see what's going to happen with the Mazars report, and if you have an update on that, I would appreciate it too. I'd just like to give one mention. Obviously, I'm interested in this area because ever since I met a number of families about 2 years ago, and it's very difficult to sit in people's kitchens, as I said here before, for people to tell you that if they don't get access to a drug, their health is seriously going to deteriorate, or in many cases, many of them will die. It's very hard to have those conversations with people. And I've said it here on the record before and to the Minister for Health, and I'll say it again. In this country, the average waiting time to approve a drug for rare diseases is 1,200 days. 1,200 days, nearly 4 years for somebody to be told that they will have access to a potentially life-saving drug. And even in that time, if you take 400 days just to negotiate with a pharmaceutical company, like the delays that we experience in the field of rare diseases, a lot of it is administrative and bureaucratic, and surely we can do things an awful lot better. So I'd appreciate your response. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy.
I want to thank the Deputy, Pádraig O'Sullivan, for raising this issue here today. And it's an issue he has shown particular interest and knowledge and information on, and he's highlighted the fact that, having met people on a face-to-face basis, he understands, and it's important that the knowledge and first-hand dealing with people who require orphan drugs, that those views are adequately reflected here in Dáil Éireann. So we fully appreciate and understand all the issues surrounding the particular issue of orphan drugs. All of us in the House fully appreciate how devastating a diagnosis of a rare disease can be for patients, families and carers, and I believe there is a cross-party support for doing everything that we can help that will help patients who live with these awful conditions on a daily basis. I know that Deputy O'Sullivan has been a long-standing advocate in this area, and as I've already mentioned, I commend him on his recent Orphans Medicine Bill, which was widely supported in the House in its second reading. The Minister for Health and indeed I myself look forward to further positive engagement as this bill progresses. The Government's track record on both initiatives and funding for rare disease speaks for itself, and I will mention a few of these in the time I have available. Many of the recommendations in the National Rare Disease Plan for Ireland 2014-18 have already been implemented, including the establishment of a National Rare Disease Office incorporating the HSE National Clinical Programme for Rare Diseases. In 2021, the Minister met with all relevant stakeholders in this area, including the HSE, the National Rare Disease Office and the Rare Disease Task Force. The Minister secured an agreement of all parties for a number of priority areas for the coming period, including European reference networks, research registers, access to services and medicines, diagnosis and policy. I'm pleased to say that the Irish Government has a long track record in supporting rare disease research through the Health Research Board. In the last 10 years alone, the Health Research Board has invested €40 million in research into rare diseases. As regards access to new medicines for the treatment of rare diseases, the Government has provided the funding which has made a real and concrete difference. Budget 2021 allocated €50 million for the reimbursement of new drugs, enabling the HSE to approve 52 new medicines. 19 of these medicines were for treatment of rare diseases. That includes a number of medicines that deal with innovative gene therapy treatment for spinal muscular atrophy, following a joint assessment with Belgium and the Netherlands. Budget 2022 has allocated a further €30 million for the reimbursement of new medicines, and I understand from the HSE that 27 new orphan drugs are presently undergoing a pricing and reimbursement assessment. There is no getting away from the fact that the overriding factor in medicines being approved for reimbursement is the availability of exchequer resources, and that this is a challenge for all of us over the coming years as more and more of these medicines become available, but often at very high asking prices. In fact, it is estimated that about 97 new medicinal indications, including treatment for rare disease, will receive market authorisation in Europe over the next 5 years. These new medicines alone will have the potential to add hundreds of millions to the state annual bill for medicines, which is already in the region of €2.5 billion annually. In terms of the assessment process, the Deputy will know that the 2013 Health Pricing and Supply of Medicine Goods Act introduced a robust statutory framework for pricing and reimbursement decisions. Under the Act, the HSE has statutory responsibility for decisions on pricing and reimbursement of medicines. The 2013 Act does not provide for a separate rule set for assessing orphan drugs. The EU HTA regulation in December 2021 will enable cooperation on clinical evidence requirements for HTAs and clinical trial design, thereby supporting innovation and addressing unmet medical needs. Thank you.
Minister. Oireachtas.
Thanks, Minister, for the response. Look, and there are, I suppose, some things that, look, I know it's not technically your response, it's not your area of expertise, but there's some things I do have issue with with the response. One being that the HSE has approved 52 new medicines, including Zolgensma, and I know that a lot of these new drugs were approved through the Benelux arrangement that you referenced in your response. But the reality is, and sorry, you later go on to say that about 97 new medicinal indications, including treatments for rare diseases, will be approved by the EMA in Europe in the next 5 years. But Ireland's track record on this is pitiful. I think we've approved, 8 out of the last 47 drugs approved by the EMA, only 8 of them have been approved in this country. So, like, I don't say it lightly that we're laggards in terms of our European counterparts, but we are. All the facts point to that. And later in the response that you have, it references, the €45,000 quality threshold, and you reference the fact that orphan drugs doesn't have a specific pathway for reimbursement, and that's specifically what my bill, which was introduced here a number of months ago, aims to achieve: a specific pathway for orphan drugs to be assessed. And we need to look at other countries, like the Swedes can do it properly, the Scots can do it, the Danes do it. And what I'm advocating in my bill is no different to what those countries have implemented, and it hasn't broken the bank. specific to my legislation, there is a reference that any drug approvals for rare diseases would have to be done subject to budgetary constraints. It's there in black and white. So this nonsense that keeps coming from the Department of Health, that this will weaken our hand at the negotiating table with pharmaceutical companies, or that it'll cost us an arm and a leg to the state, is nonsense. And I've said it here before, and I have no problem reiterating it. So look, I get frustrated because it is a case of the most difficult conversation I've ever had with a person in my life is sitting around that kitchen table, as I've referenced. And I've no doubt that the waiting times I referenced earlier are fact. They were from a PQ from Deputy Michael Moynihan a number of years ago. I gave the stat at the start in terms of the number of children in particular that die under the age of 5, 30%. So every year that is lost negotiating and prevaricating around the price of a drug is lives lost. Thank you.
Thank you, and I want to thank the Deputy for his reference to the note I circulated before I spoke, which deals with the HSE has sufficient scope from the legislation to consider the unique circumstances surrounding orphan drugs, such as small patient numbers, and the evidence suggests that these expensive orphan drugs are getting reimbursed, even in many cases when they far exceed the National Centre for Pharmacoeconomics Quality Assisted of Life year metric of €45,000, which the Deputy himself has already mentioned here in his contribution. The pipeline for new medicines coming to market remains strong in Ireland, and Ireland is committing to funding access to new and innovative therapies, including those for rare diseases. Increasingly, products within the orphan drug designation have extremely high prices and budget impact. I would say at this stage, I think one lesson we've learned from COVID is the importance of countries within the EU working together in relation to pricing, sourcing and contracting and placing orders for these. And once they get regulatory approval in the different countries, we've seen the value of this and in relation to delivery of drugs, and it's something I would have long called for, and I think it's actually something we have learned in relation to COVID, and this should be extended, that principle should be extended into these areas as well. As regards the Mazar's report regarding the drug reimbursement process, this work stream was suspended to reallocate resources in support of the pandemic response, so I don't have a date of when that can actually be completed. It was suspended for that. And I know previously the Deputy mentioned online publication of the Rare Disease Technology Review Committee meeting minutes, and the HSE and the Department would support the online publication of these meeting minutes with a view to improving transparency with respect to the committee. And then the issue in relation to guaranteed waiting, which the Deputy has raised before, I understand that the Department view is not possible at this time to commit to the signing of guaranteed waiting for Rare Disease Technology Review Committee recommendations in the assessment process. So finally, I want to thank the Deputy, and the additional points you've raised here, I will take them back directly to the Minister at the first available opportunity.
Thank you, Minister.